The MLB trade deadline is officially over as the Phillies do get Yohan Duran and Harrison Bader, but do not make any other moves. I'm Coy Camiscioli of Phillies Sports Talk here. I'm going to break down the Phillies deadline for you and discuss some other situations in the National League as the Phillies. I'm going to tell you bluntly right now, I think this is bad. I was very impressed when they got Yohan Duran last night, and I did a whole podcast talking about that and their series recap with the White Sox. And I thought it was a big time move. You know, you're getting a legitimate top 10 solidified closer in baseball. But the only other move made is getting Harrison Bader. And listen, that's not bad. You know, last year's deadline, that may have not been a bad thing, might have been a solid deadline, whatever. The reason why it's bad in my eyes is because they were lapped by the Padres and the Mets. Absolutely lapped. It wasn't even close. And I don't think this team is. I think this team is still capable to win a World Series. Durant, again, I'm very confident about that. But you know what's going to be a problem? Having guys like Max Laser, Daniel Robert, Alan Ronhell, and Seth Johnson being your setup guys. I'm obviously joking. Those aren't going to be your key setup guys every night. You're going to have Matt Strom in the postseason. You know, we'll see what happens with David Robertson when he comes back. You're going to have Kirk Rain. So you're going to have some options. But I just, I with what the Padres and the Mets did and some of the other National League teams, it's just disappointing entirely. You know, they're talking about going all in, all this stuff like that, and they've done this for years. It's not happening right now. It's disgraceful if I'm being honest. And the thing that I don't really understand with like a guy like Dombrowski, he was known his whole career for being a buyer. Plus, what like you have no idea how long you're going to be with the franchise for. Why would you not want to see your team win? You probably might not be around to see guys like Miller, uh, Painter, or obviously and Justin Crawford. I know those guys aren't too far, but at the same time, you know, who knows when they're at their peak if this team is going to be what's going to be constructed with this team. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, I don't know if Kyle Schwarber is going to re-sign this year if this team doesn't do well in the postseason. And if they lose Schwarber, I think they're screwed. I flat out think they're screwed. Um, and then, you know, you're keeping your prospects. I know Miller, Painter, and Crawford are obviously high end prospects, but that's assuming that they do pan out. And with not deciding to either tank or go all in, which obviously we're not going to tank. When you don't decide to do one of those and you kind of just hang around the middle, you know your good players now are eventually going to falter or salt away, and then your prospects come up and they're really just refilling the holes that were just previously made empty from the guys that just left. So you're kind of just stuck in like a purgatory spot. We see it a lot of times in sports. Just some things off the top of my mind. You see it with teams like the Pacers in basketball until this year, because when they didn't go get Pascal Siakam, they were a fifth or sixth, fourth seed every single year, and just like losing every single year. You see it all around in every single sport. I'm trying to think of some equivalents in baseball. I'm obviously not taking a cut here, you know, but it's an issue. It really is an issue. I just don't understand why you don't want to go all in to go grab more players. I don't get it. So listen, Duran and Bader's not bad. I know I talked about Duran in my recent podcast, so I'll give the whole rundown on him again. 16 saves this year in 49 games, 2.01 ERA, 2.3 WAR, 2.3 WAR that is. 49 innings pitched, 53 strikeouts, just one home run given up. So keeping the ball in the park, which is big. 18 walks, 40 hits in those 49 innings. So some great numbers. Lockdown closer, as I said. He's under club control until 2027. He's arbitration eligible in 2026, free agent eligible in 2028. And along with that, Harrison Bader, he's a 2.8 WAR this year. He's batting 258 with 12 homers, 38 RBIs, 10 stolen bases, has an OBP of 338, and an OPS of 778. So some solid numbers. He's a Gold Glove caliber outfielder, but it's just not the big bat that the Phillies told fans that they were going to get. So that's my whole thing with this all season. I mean, not all season deadline. Again, I like Bader. It's a good move. And obviously, I really like Durant. But when you go and look at what the Padres and the Mets did, which I'm going to pull up right now, the Padres get Mason Miller, J.P. Sears, Ramon Laureano, Ryan O'Hearn, Freddie Fermin, Nestor Cortez, Will Wagner. You know, you name it, they got it. And the Mets, they go get Ryan Helsley, Tyler Rogers, Cedric Mullins, Gregory Soto. So If you haven't been tuned into the recent Phillies podcast, you're just listening for this one. I've been saying before the deadline coming up that the Phillies, there's like three options. You need to go all in on the bats on the deadline. You need like two to three bats, with two of them being solidified good lineup hitters, or you need to go all in on the pitching, where you get like three bullpen arms, and two of them pretty good, one of them maybe solid, or you do a mix of both. And they kind of just lingered well under that, getting just one bullpen arm and one average, slightly above average hitter. So it's just the Mets, they got three bullpen arms in Helsley, Rogers, and Gregory Soto. And obviously, they go get a bat, including Cedric Mullins. I know that's not a big time bat, but they did go all in on that bullpen. They stacked up that bullpen. And obviously, the Padres did a little bit of mix of both, getting Mason Miller, J.P. Sears, and then they get hitters like Laureano, Ryan O'Hearn. They also get guys like Nestor Cortez. So it's just, I don't understand. I really don't. And listen, I know the Padres gave up a haul. They gave up the third overall prospect in all baseball to get Millers and Sears. But it's just I don't know. We didn't need to go for Miller and Sears. Those are not the two guys that I was really like begging the Phillies to go get. There's just some other guys. It just didn't make sense to me. Watching your two biggest rivals, going just get players after player after player, and not obviously the biggest rivals, but two of your biggest rivals in the National League. It's two of the biggest threats. So obviously the Dodgers didn't do too much, but their team is as good as it is. They just need to get healthy. The Cubs, they got Willie Castro and a couple of other pieces. I just listen. I think I would have originally graded this trade deadline like a B minus, like if it was just Duran and Bader, like just off those moves. But considering what the Mets and the Padres did, and the other and the whole National League, I give this I give this a D plus, and that might be a little harsh. And honestly, probably more realistic would be C minus. But I think my feelings get in the way there to give them a D plus. Just one of these years you got to go all in, and they just haven't done that the last 3 years. And I'll tell you right now, that's why they have not resulted in a World Series victory, because they just haven't gone all in, and there's just pieces missing. I'm not quite sure the hesitance. They obviously didn't have to trade all three of Painter, Miller, and Crawford, but they could have traded Crawford. They could have traded. They could have traded either or. They could have traded one of them and some other prospects. He had a big time bat. Maybe we could have looked at Luis Robert a little more. So some other different players. I don't know, but this is an issue, and I'll tell you that right now, because obviously the Phillies, they lost to the Mets last year. The Mets add Juan Soto, and then they just have a deadline like this to stack up their bullpen. And the Padres, who are already one of the biggest threats, they go out and do what they did at the deadline. They're a lot more dangerous already. So I tell you, I'm very disappointed. I think Dave is a little. I don't know. This is not good for Dave Dombrowski. I have to tell you guys that I don't think this team is going to go far. I do think this team could still win the World Series. It's not one of those things where you're just going to be watching the postseason knowing they're going to lose like we do with the Sixers or something. You're still going to expect to win when you have this starting rotation that the Phillies have with Wheeler, Sanchez, Ranger, and Luzardo, and even Taiwan Walker, with how solid he's been with as a day five starter, even though he's not going to be starting in the postseason. But you're going to expect to win games from that rotation. It's not like the hitters are horrible, but they're just not great. And Harrison Bader does not fill that massive hole that is in the outfield. And Yohan Duran does not fill that massive hole that's in the bullpen. If that hole is halfly covered, I will say that. Duran was a big time move. And if the Phillies still had Jose Alvarado, I'd say that they're looking really sharp right about now. But we don't. That's the bottom line. He can come back for the regular season. Whoop-de-doo. Who cares about the regular season? This team needs to perform in the postseason. So, again, I think this is a failure of a deadline. I thought Duran was an awesome trade, and I thought that after that maybe this team really is all in, because it was a big-time move. It was not the case. So, yes, I am concerned about the Phillies. The Mets and Padres did lap them at this trade deadline, and I'm not going to lie to you, I don't think this team is going to win it all. But again, that doesn't mean I don't think they can. It's just with what the Mets and Padres did, it's hard to enjoy what the Phillies did. I think they just completely lapped us in every fashion of things. So that's going to do it. I'll be back on Sunday for a Phillies versus Tigers series recap, and I'll keep going from there. Just a really disappointing trade deadline from the Phillies, and I think they're in a little bit of trouble here. So thank you guys.